who want um, advise that a good quick note, as many of you probably know with COVID, this specific industry had a lot of challenges with Montana state law not aligning with CDC guidance. And so in the event of um, something similar happening, it would be a good idea for you to seek legal advice to kind of navigate some of that. We did have a childcare client that wound up into some hot water with some employees over vaccination requirements and things like that. So just a little start to the presentation. Okay, so first, the first topic I have is just kind of hiring and interviewing. First of all, just make sure that you're doing background checks and checking references, calling references, things like that. In the state of Montana, it is illegal for a government agency, public or private employer, person or firm to employ women at a compensation less than that paid to a man. And then also, as you are probably all very aware, you're not allowed to discriminate in your hiring practices based on race, gender, religion, disability, etc. You can have a policy that employees must be able to lift a certain amount of weight, specifically with children. You know, that might be up to 50 pounds or something. You may have that requirement in your hiring practices, and that would not be discriminatory. You also should determine what certifications you'll require, such as CPR and first aid. Those might be under state licensing requirements, but you may, as an employer, decide that you want to implement additional trainings and requirements. Make sure that those are all written in your employee descriptions and your agreements, and then make sure that you have a system in place that tracks those and makes sure that they're not expiring and they're kept up to date. Especially working with kiddos, it's all good things to have. And then the next topic is the right to work. Montana is not a right to work state. So that means union membership or continued membership can be a condition of employment. I don't think this is really common in your industry, but it's just worth to note. There was a proposed right to work House bill. It didn't get passed last year, but that could change in the next legislative session. Next we have probationary periods. So as of October 1st, 2023, employees have an automatic probationary period for the first 12 months of employment, which means that you as an employer may terminate the employee at will, which just means that you don't need cause. But a probationary period may not exceed 18 months. So in your employment agreements, you can have a probationary period for more or less than the 12 months, but you can't have one for more than 18 months. And these should just be written, very spelled out policies, so that if you go to terminate an employee within that first year, and they try to come back at you for a wrongful discharge cause of action, you have something to point to that they were in their probationary period. And then next we have required postings in the workplace. So there are certain posters that you're required to display for employees in the workplace. Those are determined under state and federal laws. The Montana Department of Labor and Industry has a really helpful website that will tell you which posters you're required to have. And then you can also get them for free through their website. You can order them, which is really nice. These posters typically are displayed in like a break room or something where employees are going to be able to review them, but just make sure that you're keeping those up to date as they change with minimum wage requirements and things like that. You just want to make sure that you're adhering to all those labor standards under Montana law and federal law. The next topic we have is insurance. So the Workers' Compensation Act applies to every employer in Montana, with or without, with 3 or more employees. So employees who suffer injuries or any occupational diseases arising out of and in the course of employment, they are eligible to receive several types of benefits under the Workers' Comp Act. Under the act, a workplace injury must be reported to the employer immediately, and failing to report the injury in a timely manner may result in a denial of benefits. So you want to make sure that employees know what the process is for making that report. It has to be written, and that you might have that policy being like in writing to an email, texting, something, some kind of documentation that says that they were injured on site or during the course of their employment. And then Montana also recognizes a private cause of action for retaliation against an employee under that act. So that just means that you as an employer can't discriminate against the employee because they made a workers' comp claim. And you may have to pay a fine if they find that you did discriminate against them or retaliate. You give the employee the worst shift because they did a workers' comp claim or something like that. That kind of action would be something that you could get in trouble for. The bulk of probably what I wanted to present today is about employee handbook and policies. I think it's just a really good practice for all employers to have an employee handbook. It'll outline the company's policies and procedures. And this is important even if you just have 1 or 2 employees. The handbook should be provided prior to the employee starting. So typically you'll hire them, and in their like new hire paperwork, you provide their employment agreement, and then the handbook, and you should have a designated signature page for the employee to sign saying that they've reviewed these policies. It's just like really good protection for you. And in the case that something comes up between you and the employee, you have kind of a CYA, if you will, that says, hey, these were all written in place. You knew about them. You can't say that you didn't know about this policy and things like that. So just like a really good thing to have. Yeah, so again, it protects you from claims of wrongful termination or discharge, helps you maintain a professional standard. So you're treating everybody the same. There's a standard that you're implementing in your business. And then just kind of helps you if you get into a tricky situation with employees. It also helps you have a standard for job performance and just written out policies for disciplinary actions and things like that. And then just some kind of just a broad overview of different type of policies that you might consider adding to your handbook are the types of leave that you're offering employees, benefits for employees, in your industry, policies related to interactions with the kids and parents. You can have like a dress code policy, time off policy, pay, things like that. And it's worth having either an attorney or some type of human resource contractor, if you work with like an HR contractor, review your handbook, make sure that it's all in accordance with state and federal laws, and that you're updating it for new and changing laws, which sounds pretty overwhelming, but there are a lot of online resources that can help you out with this. And then just making sure that you're upholding the policies in the handbook. You can have an issue if you're not upholding one policy and then suddenly with a new employee you are, that might look discriminatory. So just something to think about. Okay, so a little bit more on those different types of policies. So big one is leave. And so you must allow employees to leave for jury duty and military leave. So military leave is for up to 5 years. And then reasonable leave of absence for a woman's pregnancy. None of those need to be paid. You, of course, could offer them paid, but typically they're unpaid leave, but you do have to offer those. You do not have, under Montana law, you do not have to provide leave for voting. You don't need to provide parental leave, holiday leave, or premium holiday pay. You also don't need to provide vacation leave. And then just a note here, parental leave is a different federal standard if you have over 50 employees. I'm kind of assuming none of you have that many employees, but if you did, that would be something to consider. Um, and then uh, and then just thinking about like benefits that you want to offer just for like hiring purposes to attract quality candidates and things like that. But there's no requirement for certain benefits that you must offer under Montana law as private employers. Um, so next we have certain type of breaks that you are required. And under Montana law, excuse me, you're actually not, there's no regulation on meal breaks or rest periods. But if an employee is working during that time, you are of course required to pay them for any work done. Even if it's like a lunch break and they're working, that's when you do have to pay them. Employers are encouraged to make reasonable efforts to provide an area in close proximity to the workplace. It's not a bathroom, to allow an employee to express breast milk in private, and facilities for the milk storage. This is not required. It's just encouraged under Montana law. Unless you have those 50 or more employees, then the Family and Medical Leave Act will apply to you. And under that law, you will have to provide that specific area for any breastfeeding that an employee might need to do. Next is the social media policy. It seems like a really important policy to have in the childcare industry. You should make it clear whether an employee is allowed to post photos or videos from the childcare facility and whether the kiddos are included in those, Snapchats, TikToks, things like that. Best practice probably would be to prohibit that type of posting. But if you do allow it, just make sure that you have a really clear written authorization from the kids' parents to take and use those photos and videos of the kids. Your social media policy should also outline appropriate phone usage. I do know that some childcare providers update parents throughout the day. I have a couple of friends who have kiddos in childcare and they get text messages from their providers. And I believe that there are also apps that allow providers to update parents throughout the day on how kids are doing. And so if you do any of those practices, you should consider whether or not you use like a designated company device for that, or if employees are using their own personal devices for that. And then if they are, just making sure that it's all appropriate and whether or not you're offering compensation for their phone plans and things like that. And then otherwise, like what type of phone use prohibitions you're going to implement, like are they allowed to be on their phone only during a break, things like that. If they're taking the kids to the park or something, I imagine they probably need to have their phones. So there are some you just want to make sure that that's pretty clear for your employees. And under Montana law, just make sure that your social media policy does not restrict your employees from free speech. So you can't have a policy that says you can't post anything negative about the company on your personal Facebook or something. That would be probably considered restricting their free speech, but you can have a policy that says during working hours, you're not allowed to be on your personal Facebook pages or making blog posts or things like that. That would be an appropriate policy. But in terms of off-site after work activities, you just want to make sure that your policy doesn't limit them from those free speech practices. Another thought with childcare specific policies is the mandatory reporting requirement. So you just want to make sure that all your employees are aware that under Montana law, as a registered or licensed daycare or substitute care facility, you're all mandatory reporters. You're probably well aware that means that within 24 hours of receiving information about a suspected child abuse or neglect, you need to make a report to the child abuse hotline through DPHHS. And I'll just read you the statute. The child abuse or neglect specifically means actual physical or psychological harm to a child, substantial risk of physical or psychological harm to a child, or abandonment. So it's just really a good idea to have that as a written policy. And then just making sure that all of your employees are following that and being careful to report all of those instances. Hopefully not something that comes up, but just a good thing to know and have in your handbook. Next, having a termination and discipline policy. So this, you want to decide if your business is going to have like a 3-strike system or some other type of disciplinary kind of action. A lot of times I see the first offense of a policy, so maybe like showing up late or something, it'd be a verbal warning. The second instance would be a written warning, and then the third would be potentially termination. You can also provide a performance improvement period or a PIP where you're offering them kind of a probationary period of improving job performance, and then just having more meetings and things like that. Just make sure that whatever system you have in place, you're following it with everybody, and making sure it's reasonable. So if you have an employee that's tardy 3 times over the course of 10 years, it's probably not really a great reason to terminate somebody. You want to kind of make sure that it's something reasonable. So if they're late for the same offense over 6 months or a year or something like that, that's something that you want to spell out specifically in your policy. Just a quick note about any non-compete policies. So that's if you wanted to have something in your handbook that prohibits an employee from working for a competitor or opening up their own facility within a certain geographical distance from yours. A lot of courts are moving away from upholding non-competes. So just know, you can always include them, but just know that there's some differing laws on whether or not those will be upheld. And a lot of times it would require you to file a lawsuit, which can be pretty costly and time consuming. So again, it's not something that it's harmful to have in your handbook, but just know that sometimes it's just kind of wasted space. So just think through some of that stuff. And then kind of the last main policy I wanted to highlight for a handbook would be like a marijuana, tobacco, and alcohol use policy. So important to include and make sure that it's stated clearly and you're upholding it. Same standard with all employees across the board. I've seen a lot of them that are zero tolerance policies. So like using either marijuana or alcohol during the course of employment, zero policy. If an employee comes to work under the influence, that can be, if you make sure you have it spelled out in your handbook, that can be grounds for immediate termination or something like that. Tobacco use, you can prohibit the use on the facility, something like that. And then also random drug testing is allowed in Montana as long as you have a clearly defined policy and your employees are notified of the policy at least 60 days in advance. Just a note to be really careful on these drug testing policies and make sure that you're following that written policy and you're treating all employees across the board equally under that. So, you're not suddenly implementing it with just the one employee that you're suspecting. It's something that you're equally upholding. Okay. The next topic I have is termination of employment. This is my last topic. And then if you guys have some questions, I'll open it up to that. So Montana is the only state that's not an at-will employment state and enforces a good cause standard for terminating employment after the probationary period. I'll read you the definition of good cause under Montana law. It's a reasonable job-related grounds for dismissal based on a failure to satisfactorily perform job duties, disruption of the employer's operation, or other legitimate business reason. So you have some You just need to make sure that you're using that documentation system that you implemented under your handbook so that you're protecting yourself from any wrongful discharge claims that an employee might bring against you. And just know that you have to pay all employees, or, if you're terminating an employee, all the wages are due immediately upon separation. So be prepared to pay them, like if they're terminated. If an employee quits, you have 15 days, or by their regular pay period. So you have a little bit more time. And then just lastly, unemployment. You are prohibited from forcing an employee to pay for the employee's contributions for unemployment, as well as coercing them to waive, release, or commute their rights to unemployment benefits, excuse me. So if their unemployment is offered if they're lost work through no fault of their own. So if you fire them for good cause, they're not gonna probably get the unemployment benefits. So yeah, just something to make sure that you're holding. Yeah. Any specific questions from everybody? Yeah, it's kind of a lot to just talk at you for a few minutes, but again, just kind of like as a wrap up, the employee handbook is just like a really good idea to have, and make sure that your employees are signing that. It's probably one of your bigger protections under just employment law in general.
Thank you so much, Madeline. That was excellent. And if you guys have questions, please jump in, put them in the chat, whatever. We can make sure that we connect you to Madeline for any other really good questions that she might have. I do want to say a quick little plug for next week. Next week's training is going to be on recruitment and retention best practices. I'm going to be doing the presentation on the 8 best practices so that we can get great hires in and keep them in, because we know that revolving door is costly for all of us, and we do want to change that up. So next Tidy training will be on the 15th, and I will be doing that one on our 8 best practices. We want to encourage everyone to join our newsletter. This is where you get all of our great information at Montana Child Care Business Connect. Shows you all the good information that we've got out there. We also encourage you to connect with us on all of our socials. We like to share your good news. If you have good news happening in your facility or something exciting coming down, please make sure that you're connecting with us. We'll do our best to get that good news out as well. As always, we do want to ask that you please let us know how we did today, and you can do that with us here at this link. And then I just want to stop sharing for a minute, say a personal thank you to everyone. I'm going to shoot out into the chat there, the link for that survey. If you want to let us know how we did today, you can do that. And we're just going to leave these last few minutes if anyone had a question for Madeline.
I have a quick question. Just to clarify, because I know what it is, but a lot of providers may not know that you can't take like their CPR or their trainings out of their paycheck if they leave.
Yeah, I don't know that specific. It sounds like Dawn, you do, so nice.
I do. It is you can't retain that back.
Okay.
I did find out from a STARS provider, because she had got her contract for her employee handbook to the state through like Raise Montana and all that, and they're like, nope, this one part is illegal. You cannot take back your CPR. You cannot take back any of the trainings you paid for. So yeah, so I've been making sure that other providers know that, but it's kind of a big one, and you wouldn't know it unless you got in trouble.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank
And
you.
likewise, we need to be paying them while they're training.
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, just want to say thanks again to everyone. As always, these trainings are 30 minutes from 1:30 to 2, and we look forward to seeing you on February 15th. My last little shout out is if you know someone who's starting a childcare facility or someone who is within their first 12 months, we're going to be kicking off our next Business Accelerator Mentorship Program. Very excited for that. Our applications for that are going to go out February 15th. So we will be talking about it at the next Tiny Training. I can guarantee you. But if you know people who could really use some business help and some mentorship from someone else in the program, we would love to get their information. And if you yourself would like to be a mentor to someone just starting a business, I'd like to speak with you too. So please reach out to us and we can let you know. Take care. Have a good day.